Welcome back, everybody. This is part two of me and John talking about blades
Yeah.
and drinking whiskey. So
Woo.
right before we started the last part, I was like, "Wait, I have bourbon," and I like ran out of the room. Like 30 seconds is enough time, no problem. It's cool.
Nice. Very
So
important. You have to remember your bourbon
yeah, it is very important. It's
or
first
scotch.
first rule of game design: brown liquor.
That's right.
Just get on it. Yeah. So yeah, we spent the first little bit just generally kind of like talking around what Blades is about and kind of where the design comes from and what it does. And then now in this little section, however long it takes us, I feel like it'd be good to just talk about. We can use Blades, or we can use Womb of Night as a framework for this, is talking about like specific hacks, because there's lots, right? There's like a superhero one and like a dungeon crawl one. There's one you play the cops, right, of the Duskwall. Like, man, there's just so much like fun stuff that you can do when you make a game that's, like I said before, like ostensible in that way. Some of the more like drifty ones, like there's some like what's Jason Morningstar's, it's some like obscure historical thing, right? Because
Yeah, it's called Coney Catchers. It's Elizabethan con artists, basically. Rapscallions. Pulling the
Jason Morningstar
classic.
presents a game about a thing you've never heard of before. I
Yeah,
love it.
yeah. He's so good at that. Condensing some aspect of history into something gameable without having to read a lot.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's gonna be cool. It's got all the little Jason Morningstar flares. So
Yeah, cool. Well, my hack, the thing that I'm doing, came from just to talk kind of a little bit about it, was so I've been playing Stars Without Number for a while, coming up on 2 years, not that long for now. I think it's like 18 months. We've been playing the same game. And originally in the premise, I wanted to do something that paid homage to kind of my favorite era of sci-fi. This kind of very weird, like just barely post 60s, very psychedelic. Like one of my mods described as wizards riding space pterodactyls, which, very much like very science fantasy. Like every planet is habitable. All kinds of weird stuff going on. There's magic and space drugs and that kind of stuff.
heavy metal.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
the magazine.
Moebius, H.R. Giger, Heavy Metal Magazine, minus all the bikinis.
Yeah.
In a way that is built around, and again, like, because I said earlier on, the thing that really drew me to Blades was that idea of the crew as an entity, as a thing independent of the people that make up that crew. So I wanted it really to be kind of the voyages of the ship in question, and kind of what those characters get up to. But it is still very much like you are one of a number of marauders in space doing maraudery space stuff. But I think that there's room to make some changes to Blades, kind of from, like you mentioned it, like just above the mechanical layer all the way up to the top, plus a bunch of weird satellites that get attached to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for me, and I guess this is a question I wanted to ask you about, is if someone had in mind the idea to make like a fairly dramatic in terms of setting and material, like hack of Blades, where would you start? Because we've had this conversation, both you and I, and the general like Apocalypse World culture at large. Like, where do you start hacking Apocalypse World? Because people generally will be like, I make some playbooks, I make classes. That's easy,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? I need a space wizard, and I need a navigatrix, and I need a planetary set. But I don't want to start there because I feel like that's too far from the origin point for doing the hack.
Hmm.
Like, where would you suggest that people start in building their own thing that's a bit more complex than just adding to the Duskwall setting and adding to that component like we talked about before?
Yeah. Um, my wishy-washy answer before this specific one
Sure.
um, is to start where you're inspired to work first, and don't worry about
Hmm.
making the hack. If you get an idea for ship names, and just start writing down your ship names or whatever. So I think any creative process can benefit from, at least the way I do it. Some people can't do anything until their
How do
outline is.
I how do I be creative, John? How do I
Yeah,
be a creative?
yeah. There's a lot of ways, but I feel like some people, they need to have their outline first. They need to understand all that and then flesh it out. I don't work that way. I tend to, there's that thing that inspires you, right? Like you're talking about,
Yeah.
like there's this spark that you have, and if the faster you can start making material for that and then not worrying about the other stuff, probably the better. I think Vincent just said this recently on his patrons forum thing about uh, starting with when he was working on Apocalypse World, he wrote the Angel playbook, and not the game. Like he started writing the Angel playbook
Sure.
and writing down stats and saying like, uh, roll and add you're hot. So, and
Right.
that wasn't a mechanic. He
What
was
are
just,
things that are true of this character that might be possible in the space? Yeah.
yeah, and in his case, he was just writing into a void and like putting the responsibility on future Vincent to figure out what going aggro meant because he already wrote that down in the playbook, and then filling it in later. In this case, like all the pieces, all the like resolution parts and all the mechanical stuff is done for you. So I would start at that layer, the poetry layer, the like
Yeah.
picking good words layer,
I like
where
that.
on whatever sheet you're excited about, whether that's the crew or a spaceship sheet, maybe you have those,
Hmm.
or a PC playbook, or a list of other factions in the setting. Maybe that's where you first start, but probably one of those like write a bunch of good, cool sounding words
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well,
processes. That's where I would start.
for me, I'm very. I mean, just listening to me describe like Womb of Night, you can kind of tell I'm very inspired by the media that I absorb. And same with you. Like you can very easily call out like these are the games and the books and the like things that inspire me. I've always liked that when you design a game, at least recently, you include a if this was a TV show, this would be the theme song. These would be the opening credits. And that I think is the thing that really speaks to me. Like my first the very first thing I did when I started thinking about women, whether I wanted to be able to if I could do it, was to just sit down and like absorb a bunch of that media, like listen to a bunch of Hawkwind albums and like
Yeah.
think about that space fictionally first. And I think that'll lead me into doing the verbs or like if I had to pick a playbook to start, it would definitely be like the navigatrix, like the person who is core to the ship and her what does she do? What are her responsibilities and what capabilities would that character have in the fictional space?
Yeah, and just saying that, as soon as you say like there's a navigatrix
Right.
playbook, you're off and running
Yeah.
in not in terms of the workload, but in terms of like conceptually, you're it's such a strong like a heavy hitting thing. Um, and yeah, I think that it's hard for me if I don't have something like the navigatrix in mind. It's hard for me to get excited about
Right.
the work, and then no one else is going to get excited about it either.
Sure. The jump from general premise to specific functional elements of that premise can be, I think, it can be a pretty big jump if
And
you're,
I think
if you're
that's
not
fine too. And
solidified.
the
Yeah.
more specific, the better. Like the other thing that I've seen is people they get caught up in this idea that their thing has to be panacea. It has to be universal. Like
Right.
I'm gonna make this thing like law enforcement in Duskwall, let's say, and if for the Blades in the Dark, I'm making the hack about the law, and it could be like, okay, what makes a good police show, or what makes good police stories, or which is fine, like that's okay to think in that direction. I find it so much more fruitful to say, okay, this is Duskwall. This is a specific place with its own specific power structures. I know the name of the guy who runs the.
Right. And you know what? This is the thing that I found really inspiring about reading Blades as is, and it's really helping me get my head around because again, I'm coming from a Stars Without Number place where so much of it is randomly generated, which I want to include some of because I think
Mhm.
being able to say we set off into the darkness of space in search of a planet to maraud, and the GM needs to come up with that stuff on the fly. So there's definitely an
Totally,
aspect of
yeah.
that. But coming from a Stars Without Number space where you really are dealing with everything being random, there are very few givens in that game, right? There's the scream, there's the way warp travel works, there's MES, but there's not a lot of other stuff. It's nice actually to feel like even though there's more work in filling those gaps in. It's nice to feel like you can create a constrained space and allow people to play in it. To say this isn't just any like murky medieval-y city, it's Duskwall. Duskwall
Yeah.
has these institutions, and I think that a lot of that goes into the table that you have of the different organizations, right? Of the different tiered, the Bluecoats and the different gangs and all of that stuff. I think once, like for me, that filling in that space is going to be quite easy.
Yep.
Um,
And it takes the pressure off you to some degree, like because it's you're not making a a playset for people to play space adventures.
yeah,
You're making Womb of Night, and
exactly. Yeah,
it supports Adam Koebel's vision of this crazy psychedelic space thing. It doesn't give people a generic set of tools to play whatever kind of space adventures they want.
yeah.
It's this specific vision. So if there's this thing that is totally like counter to the like a particular genre trope, great. Like you don't have to cut that
Yeah.
because it's not the way they did it in Star Trek or whatever. Like uh, you can just narrow in your own vision and make it very specific and surprising, and um, then like I said before, like this is going to be its own weird little thing with its own idiosyncrasies, and maybe it has like 60% of the stuff some future person needs to make their thing that's about space wizards or whatever.
Sure. There's lots of
Uh,
different variations on space wizardry, and
yeah,
this just happens to be my
this is
idea.
yours, and
Yeah.
and we want your vision. That's what we crave as the audience. We don't want a generic
Well,
pastiche.
and I think that runs counter to the marketing of so much like role playing material that exists in the world right now, where it's like this game is the game for you, whether you want to do epic high fantasy or gritty low fantasy or whatever, and it ends up with these very diluted designs. And I think that for me, it's not just that I'm lazy and don't like designing math stuff, but that's what I like about hacking existing games where I'm like, oh, there's a thing about this game. Like I like the momentum of Apocalypse World, but I think I can do a different thing with it. And I think in a lot of ways, that's what really inspires me is being able to say, I have a very clear idea of the aesthetic. And a lot of Hacking Blades feels like to me about bending the aesthetic, about taking that very well defined aesthetic and finding other ways to fill the space with the same engine behind it, the same sort of push.
Yeah, it's kind of like I don't know. You're replacing all the aesthetic components with your aesthetic components.
Hmm.
Then you also have the option to change mechanics if you want to. But the important part is to say, okay, here's this whole swath of content about
Well, the footprint,
city
the
leadership
yeah,
and
the footprint of the mechanics in the game, as we define it, because a lot of it is mechanics, but what we define as kind of the core resolution system, that footprint is so small in Blades. Like it's very powerful, but it's tiny, right? It's like one page in the book with a bunch of other stuff that supports and is supported by it. And so I think that again, like you obviously did this on purpose to design it that way, but it's easier to think about rebuilding those outer layers, right? Shedding that stuff, replacing them with things that work maybe a little bit differently, but still work fundamentally according to the principles of that core piece of the game. Um,
yeah,
so for me, like we talked a little bit before about the idea of the modular components of the different playbooks, and the idea of in Blades you have the crew and its crew type. And I've been thinking, I was thinking before about whether I want to go with it's a default thing that you're all in space and have a ship, because I think that's kind of where I want to go, but whether I want it to be different kinds of operators in space or whether it's the ship itself that I want to be cognizant of and how it affects the players. And I think that they're both very different directions, but it was
yeah,
very heartening, I guess, to hear you talk about how the crew thing came from like the Serenity and the idea of it being around that, and a lot of the ways that Swan Song has been developing, where it's like characters come and go, but the Swan Song remains. And even if
yep,
the ship got blown up, its name could be passed on, like symbolically. It's like the Enterprise, right? There's been like what 6 Enterprises. You
exactly.
can lose the ship, but you can carry the title on. So what
And I
I'm,
think if you want to, you could, multiply it more. Like right now, there's like two factors. There's I'm a cutter. Well, I guess there's sort of like three already, but I'm a cutter who like has the supernatural ability where I can like fight ghosts with my bare hands, and I'm a smuggler.
Right.
And though it's like D&D or Danger Patrol or something where you're like
Right.
I'm an elf, uh, necromancer, or I'm a psychic detective.
So
And but you could, if you wanted, you
yeah.
can add a third factor if you wanted. It could be, I'm the navigatrix with a group of raiders on a hive ship or whatever
Sure.
you wanted
Yeah,
to sort of
yeah.
expand the
Exactly.
possibilities.
I'm a barbarian space wizard on Sky Whale or whatever.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense. So
not that you have to go that way, but
right, but in
possible to just
doing
add another sheet
I was
into the.
saying doing that, that would add, yeah, a separate sheet, and then you can change them in and out. So like we may be pirates now, and we have a abandoned 10,000-year-old military ship. We're gonna change out the ship for a faster, stolen yacht, but we're still pirates, right? It's still
Yep.
you still apply the same thing. Cool.
Yep.
Okay. So that's, I mean, that was the thing for me is like trying to decide between those two things. And I think what I'll likely do is focus on the ship first and play that a little bit, do a little testing and see if that feels like enough,
hmm
and then go from there.
That feels right to me because at least the way I'm getting the aesthetic from you so far is it's very stylish.
Yeah,
So being able to even have a silhouette of the ship or an actual piece of art or something, or just a cool name of that type of thing.
oh yeah, there'll be lots of name tables
Yeah,
and
the charred Hulk or whatever they're
yeah,
called. Like this because it's such a stylish thing. You kind of want that stuff. You want to be able to say, "I'm a navigatrix on the ancient Hulk," and right away, we're already like crew types are cool, but they're not necessarily as cool as the badass spaceship that you have because we
sure.
all love that part
Yeah,
of.
and I think it's less important that like Han Solo is a smuggler. It's less important than that than he's the captain of the Millennium Falcon, right? That it's
Yeah,
like that characterization of ships and like there's a ancient tradition of ships being like very very personified in that way, and I like the idea of introducing that as the thing that ties the characters together, regardless of. It also frees me up to give them different kinds of jobs, right? Like if you're smugglers, you smuggle stuff. And
yeah,
like if you're doing pirate things, you're outside your core realm. But if you happen to be just the crew of the Black Mariah does a bunch of different stuff. And maybe today you're
yeah.
smuggling, and maybe tomorrow you're on a bounty hunting mission, and maybe the next day you're shipping refugees off of some dying planet or whatever, so you can rob them.
Yeah, yeah, but it's still it can still be a galvanizing choice because
Yeah.
the type of ship you choose is they're not all the same. So
Right.
you're already going to have this kind of
Well, so
like
let's talk a little bit about the idea of advancement developing both the crew or the ship in this case and the playbooks themselves because you can start off in one place and as you advance the ship or advance the characters they become different, right?
Mhm.
So in that way, you could tailor if you find that your characters are inclined towards missions of piracy, you can tailor the ship to become a pirate ship, right? You can create, and these can be obvious things like, added boarding protocols. Like you have boarding tubes and special weapons and, space hawks to attack the enemy ship or whatever. But they can also just be about like boarding training for your crew. And as the ship grows and as your crew grows, because you get NPCs for the ship, you can hire specialized crew for that stuff.
And there's a built-in like idea in the mechanics here for this where your playbook or your crew sheet has okay, here's all the special abilities of smugglers,
Yeah.
and one of those is how your vehicle, your smuggling vehicle, can like help you in group actions and stuff. Because it's so you have your tricked out cool um, barge that you use to smuggle stuff, and it like
Yeah. You have your giant flying space bong or whatever.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and so all of the special abilities on that sheet, on the crew sheet or the playbook, character playbook, all support the idea of that character. The more you take, the more you become like that type of thing.
Yeah.
Then at the bottom of each set of options is the so-called veteran advancement. And when you take the veteran advancement, it says choose a special ability from any other source that isn't your character sheet or your crew sheet or whatever. And that lets you. It's the multi-classing, idea.
Hmm.
Yes, I'm a fighter, but I also can cast magic missile. I took this cross-class, thing. And I could see that happening with ships here too, where this particular hull type is all of its advances make it a better, creepy, ancient spaceship.
Hmm.
And then as a veteran advance, you can take
You take the holodeck or the
from the piracy
right.
type missile.
Yeah, you
Even
take
though
the
it's not
space
on the
pterodactyl
list.
rookery and just throw it on the back there. Yeah.
Right, and vice versa. We have the hot new military stealth vessel, and we, as one of our veteran advances, we take the creepy thought chamber from
Right.
the other ship, and we happen to have one of those on our vessel. So that lets you kind of make that the core list all very supportive of that central idea, but without forcing people to be one
Well,
thing.
and one way that I want to bend Blades as it stands is that, like in Blades on the crew sheet, there's that little sort of map, right? There's it's basically like a skill tree, but spread out over a bunch of places, and you buy components of it to increase the tier of the thing. I want that to be like a map of the ship, and you're buying
Mhm.
rooms, or like I want to steal from FTL and be like, we're
Yeah,
gonna buy a better reactor, and then we're gonna add some like weapon stuff. But to make the weapons, we need to make like another thing in between those two. Like a degree of, really like that mini game, and I think as a
yep,
group playing that, it's really fun to be like, oh, let's fill in this box so we can move in this direction, off towards being able to buy this other thing. And I think that's
yeah,
interesting too,
and
because there's a freedom in Womb that the characters, like, you can't really leave Duskwall. Like, there's a map of the world, and you could theoretically go to other places, but I feel like that is more the purview of the clock, right? Like I have a job. My mission is to get my family out of Scotland, and I'm going to work on that on downtime. But it's not going to be like a very special Scotland episode of Blades in the Dark. You're not going to go there necessarily.
yeah, probably not. Yeah,
So the expansion in Blades is about neighborhoods. It's about turf, right? But the inverse is sort of true in Womb of Night, where you just like drop in and out of space, and you're navigating the star seas. So it's more about carrying your home with you and
yes,
expanding it on that,
absolutely.
right? It's about having this place that you can make safer or better or cooler or tougher based on those things. So that's a place where I think I'm gonna have to go a little deeper to hack, because there isn't really turf. There isn't really like that stuff in the same way.
Yeah, but I think you're really smart there. Like that, from a mechanical point of view, it can fill the same niche, but presentation-wise, it is the ship components that you're.
Well, and in the same way that turf can get taken away, ship systems can get damaged, right? Like,
Yeah.
you come up against the Payon Empire fleet, and they blow up two of your weapons, and they damage your life support. Those things can go away in the same way that you can lose turf to enemy gangs in
Yeah.
Blades. So fundamentally, in the narrative space, they're quite different. But I think that expanding on the ship and the idea of these kind of scrappy ships that tack on pieces to grow, I think that there's a degree of appeal there. There's a space there that I can play around in.
Definitely. And if you want to cleave very closely to Blades here, it may suggest a feature of your setting. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth here, but
Yeah,
the
yeah.
first thing I thought of was in Blades, turf. Your turf map is a map of things you can add to your crew, to your power level and stuff, but they're all currently held by someone else.
Right.
So as soon as you go to get one, it's not like you go to the store and buy one. You have to take it from someone
One
who
turf,
does.
please.
Yeah, you got to take it from someone else, and that it plays into the sandbox idea where as soon as you do that, you've pissed someone off, and da 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 da. The easy answer that just obviously occurs is, right, like maybe it could be that a feature of the setting is that starships are rare or powerful.
It's the 40K thing where it's very difficult for, I mean, because I definitely envision the same kind of power balance where you are these kind of scrappy anarchistic, like, you're an adjunct to society. You're not, if you were real, you would live in the Star Palace of Princess whatever, but you're this loser who has to steal guns. You can't just go to a store and buy them necessarily.
Hmm.
Plus, it also allows us to do a bit of the sort of space fantasy thing where you're like, well, we found this, ancient crystal in the volcano of Drax, and we're gonna, like, I don't
Exactly.
know, fucking hammer it onto the side of the ship and see what happens when we run some power through it.
And it fills that role for the GM too. In Core Blades, you say, "Oh, we really want this gambling den," and so the players have to say, "Hey, GM, who has a gambling den we can take?"
Yeah.
and they go look at a list and they come up with a name and they look at that NPC and they go, oh yeah, it's this guy, da 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 da. And similarly in Womb of Night, you might say, oh, we really want that transdimensional teleporter. Where can we get one of those? And the GM goes,
Yeah,
oh,
who's got one of those? Yeah.
like the Spider Queen of whatever, like, yeah, they probably have one. You want to go, yeah.
Yeah.
And that it's the same kind of hook.
Yeah, you need the gland of the terrifying space weasel. Go
Exactly.
get it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so everything drives playing the game of scoundrels pulling jobs, as opposed to having these convenient outs where you can just go buy it, or you can just whatever. Like everything you're doing feeds into play, into going on a cool adventure. Essentially, is how you get a new part for your ship.
Yeah, well, because that supports again that core idea of being the sort of scrappy band tied around this ship, heading to accomplish a goal that other people might be competing with you about, right? Like sure. Like the only way to get a faster warp drive is to juice a space weasel, but the space weasel colony happens also to be under attack by some Drogian pirates, and you got to go and like deal with them first, then also the farmers, and like go through that whole process.
Yep.
And
then it flips around too. When someone wants a faster warp drive, you have one.
Right, exactly. Yeah, they're gonna come
And
after you.
so you put yourself back in the food chain, and someone's going to come and want to get it from you, and yeah.
So I guess tier is the thing that kind of covers your, like, tier is publicly known, right? Like everybody knows in Blades you're a tier 1 or a tier 0 or whatever gang. So rep to a degree is built into that, right? And individual characters don't have their own reputation, right? That's not like necessarily a thing.
They not mechanically.
Yeah.
Your rep is like you might have like non-jargon term. You might have a rep as being a butcher or something, but the
I mostly
assumes that in order to have like rep, you gotta represent a faction. You gotta be like, I'm with so and so, and then people are like, oh, okay, or like happened in our game where you're like, we're the Six Towers gang, and everyone's like, who the fuck is that?
Yeah, who is that? We
don't care.
Star-Lord, man, come on. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm just thinking about heat primarily because I'm not sure that I want to portray like a fictional universe in which there's like a police force that would bring that heat. Like I would rather that it's much more isolated, much more competition based, but then there's some other factor that creates tension, because that's sort of what that's heat's primary method, right? Is to be like, it's downtime, deal with it, or it gets worse and you get arrested. And so I think that's a place where I'm going to have to do a little bit of reorienting around what creates that tension in the setting.
Yeah. So what heat does is it represents friction in the special operations jargon sense. William McCraven's great book. If you haven't read it, it's awesome. I think it's called Special Operations. Really, really good. And he goes into this idea that like every minute you spend on site doing a job, infiltrating a base or whatever it is, you accrue friction. It's just Murphy's Law, essentially. Like there's chances are that someone's going to get up in the middle of night and go to the bathroom and see you, or the power was out, or the longer you do it, the more chances for things to go wrong appear. And then not just while you're doing the thing, but afterwards, you mistakenly left something that identifies you, or someone saw you get into the van, or all these kind of things. So instead of having to like make the GM keep track of all that shit, you just go, well, stuff must have happened during the job, and afterwards we turn that into a number of a little bit of heat or a lot.
I think that there's a degree, thinking about Blades in general, there's a degree of this kind of conversation you have with your players early on, where if they're the kind of players that are used to or expecting very nitpicky, like, I didn't leave any bullet casings behind, I said I picked them up. You're like, well, the mechanics don't really give a shit about your individual actions on the tiniest, most granular level. Like, it just assumes these things happen.
Yeah, like, can we agree that you are not perfect and you make mistakes sometimes? Because if we can't agree on that, we have a problem.
Yeah.
But with this, like, so heat accrues and eventually like makes, it's called wanted level in Blaze, but really what wanted level does is it ups the it's a stars in GTA. It's like when people come for you, it's 1 to 4 stars of response.
There's parallels between that and the general die mechanic of what situation you're in. There's like low heat, medium heat, and fricassee, right? Like
Yeah,
if you have low heat, it's easier to get shit done. And what I found playing Blades is that there's this very kind of player turn, GM turn, mouse guardy kind of feeling to it, where you're like, okay, we got to do this in the right order, because we definitely in our game that I'm playing with the mods, we ran into this problem where somebody generated a bunch of heat on their action, and the next person was like, well, now I got to clean up your mess. Like I was gonna pursue my goal. I was gonna go do a weird experiment, but now I have to go and deal with the problem you just created. Thanks a lot. And you have to kind of like, and I love that. I love that kind of GM can sit back and let the players kind of have to game themselves through that stuff. The
super
thing,
good.
the
So
thing,
to finish that thought,
yeah, yeah.
all of that, the reason all that exists is so you have entanglements.
Yeah.
Entanglements are the fictional outcomes because we don't really care that you have 6 heat or you have 1 wanted level, right? What we care about is what happens is some dudes show up and drag one of your friends into prison and question them
Sure.
or whatever. And so that's where you get to decide if there are cops or if there are like what
A SWAT team or
actually are. It doesn't have to be police. It doesn't have to be the way you write those entanglements determine what kind of trouble your characters are gonna encounter
yeah.
because of heat. And so you as the author get to decide. Like you don't need a galactic space force unless you want one. All those entanglements could be
I can come at it from another angle, yeah.
weird psychic stuff that happens because you're in warp space too long or whatever.
Sure, yeah, like the Navigators Guild decides to shut you off from getting new maps, or
Exactly.
there's
Yeah.
like bounties are an easy one to
Oh
power.
yeah, bounties are great.
I mean,
Yeah.
the idea is this sort of Wild Westy, like, anarcho syndicalist, like all that matters is like profit in space, and the people with money, the more you piss them off, the more they're going to put pressure on you. And I think, yeah, just finding a new way to express that heat. The other thing that I was thinking about is localized heat, right? Is that the idea of, like, if you go to this particular planet and you piss off that planet, maybe you're never allowed back there again, it doesn't mean that the next system over, that it's going to carry over
Yeah,
necessarily.
that's a cool idea. Yeah.
And I
Well,
don't,
we can't go back to Sector 4. Our heat's way too high there.
sure, like having certain sectors burn out or whatever, tracking
Yeah,
heat in
that's cool.
some way.
That's a good idea. I like that.
Because again, like in my experience with Swansong, that's a thing that tends to happen, right? They'll go to the crew will go to a planet and they'll dramatically fuck up their mission. They'll do something horrible, but the system is a big place. Sector's a big place. You go do something else for a while, hang out, wait, let the heat cool down. It may not affect you elsewhere, but if you go back, and it allows
Yeah.
the GM to bring in complications to be like, cool, yeah, you cause a bunch of problem on this planet, and a bounty hunter will come after you from there. They'll follow you because you reached that entanglement level. 1 to 3, they're going to be like, well, just don't come back. But 4 to 6, they might be like, you don't come back, and we're going to get you. It's to make sure you don't go anywhere. Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, I mean, in a way, like Stars Without Number, the Swansong series starts the kickoff event of episode 1, as I recall, is JP like murdering a dude,
Yeah.
shooting him in the back of the head for no good reason, and that the fallout from that like really drives a lot of like not right away, but it carries forward and it really matters, even though they didn't give a shit about it.
Yeah, several episodes later, and that's a factor of trying to create that universe that feels big because there's lots of spaces to go, but small in that the heat you create follows you around.
Yep.
And yeah, I definitely foresee a place in which it's like we need to get a job. Okay, there's 6 jobs. Well, 5 of those planets we can't go back to. So we
Yeah.
like we gotta. So tying that job table or tying that system thing into, because for me the system, the space that you have in the galaxy or however we want to talk about it, that space is very important, and the different planets and the way that they orient. I definitely see factions being tied to that and heat being tied to that, and the idea of where you are, different factions are more powerful and that kind of thing.
That's an interesting idea. I don't know what you think about this, but like the idea that yeah, space is infinite, but like let's just say randomly that there are like 12 sectors.
Yeah.
There can be an infinite number of places to go and worlds to deal with in Sector 2, But Sector 2 is run by these three factions, and
Right.
like it's not like that you run out of space or something, but
Right. Yeah, yeah.
you
Like, oh yeah, we can't go back there. Well, we've never been to that planet. Yeah, but it's in Coluvian space. We gotta stay away from that. Like,
yeah, there is this idea of kind of like factional control, and
well,
that can still be a factor without having it to be like there are these three planets, and
well, so I mean, in core Blades, it's very gang centric in that all we really care about is how aligned you are, particularly. I mean, not all we care about, but mostly we care about how your gang is aligned with all the other factions that kind of orbit you. Now, there's some, I noticed this in the quick start. There's some information about like these are the red sashes. They're friends of these people and they don't like these people. So there might be a space there to say, if you've angered the golden marauders in Sector 2, they're friends with the Danubian blood devils in Sector 3. So if you
yes.
go there, there's some carryover between the two, where they've got some advanced warning, or there's some kind of
And
like,
that's how your faction status works. It's up to the GM to track it because they have to care about it. If they don't care, then it's fine. But um, when you do a job that pisses off a faction, you go and look at their friends list, and you can go, yeah, you also take -1 with the gondoliers
right.
and the hive because of what you did.
Sure, and
You look at their
sometimes,
enemies list and you go,
yeah,
and also the land blacks come and talk to you and say, good job.
yeah,
You get +1 with them.
yeah. They hate you now, but we might be your friends, or
Yeah,
at least help you, because now we can take advantage of you.
yeah,
Yeah, no, and I like that idea, like fleeing to friendly space, but then having to deal with the complication of maybe it's not as friendly as you thought, or whatever, and like balancing that like
and
your
because that web isn't clean, like you do something to hurt someone and it helps their enemy, but that person is also your enemy, so you end up like helping them, and
Mhm.
you're like, oh, damn it, I didn't want to help them.
Right. Yeah, well, and that's the thing is like you might want to raid the space weasel farm for weasel juice for your engine, but in doing so, your minor raid has lowered their defenses enough that your enemies sweep in and they're like, "Ah, guess who has a fucking space weasel monopoly now?"
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I dig it. That's really cool. Yeah, and I guess that's the thing for me is like there's a territoriality that exists in Womb of Night, or will exist in Womb of Night, that is maybe not absent but different from that kind of who controls the block thing, but not completely separate. So it'll
Right.
be, I think, different, but in a way that allows for some parity that I think will be interesting and easy to design around. Um,
One way to think of it that might be fruitful is that the like in Blades, it is about who controls the block. It's this very specific place, finite. So
yeah,
everything inside the walls of Duskwall, and there's a map and everything, and there's districts and blah blah blah. It seems very specific, but there's nothing on the map in the finite space that says this building
yes,
is
yeah,
the Hive's drug refinery. It doesn't say that. So, in a way, it is this kind of void space that things can pop in and out of existence in play,
sure, yeah.
even though it's in this finite city.
Well,
And in the space version of the game, it gives you permission to literally like be like, well, of course, there's another planet or whatever. So
yeah, and I imagine creating a similar kind of map of what does space look like. Space has inhabited sectors in these areas. This is the dark cloud. This is like areas that people don't go. This is the ship graveyard or whatever. But the details of those things are in the same way that we know where the river is in Duskwall. We know where the canals go,
yeah,
but we don't know who controls those particular canals. And filling that in rather than having like a blank hex map and being like draw a bunch of stars on this thing.
right.
Yeah, I like
You
that
still have
idea.
permission to always say, oh, yeah, there's a dock here that so and so uses. Like, well, that's not on the map. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, things can always spring up as needed in play. And when you're out in space, it just gives you even more permission for that. But having some sort of orienting map, I think, is a pretty good feature.
Yeah. Well, I can see space for having, pun notwithstanding, additional maps for space to have. Here are 6 or 8 sample like solar systems, or
Yep.
here's like some opportunity for that. I really liked how in and I petitioned y'all to re-add them to the PDF. How in or Apocalypse World Dark Ages, it had those weird, like, I can't. There's a specific name for them, but the very strange sort of diamond jagged shape maps.
Fractally, they do have a name.
They have a
Sage,
specific mathematic name. Yeah, Sage would know what it is because he's a
he
nerd.
put him back in.
Yeah, I saw they were re-added. I was talking about that on Google Plus, where I was like, "Give me those weird maps back," because those are so good for drawing just like strange shapes that you can occupy with things. So
It's so good.
that kind of level of map outline or like space to fill in with planets, I think is really really useful and something that I would want to give people an opportunity to do.
Yeah, and again, it orients you. It gives the players a way of taking the initiative, something we haven't really talked about actually, which is very important for Blades in the Dark. A lot of these systems in the game are built in such a way where the dynamic of session planning, like what's going to happen next week when we play Blades in the Dark, is on the players to determine, not the GM.
Yeah.
The GM can do prep. There's all kinds of stuff you can do as prep if you want to, but like what's the game about? What is going to happen? Where are we going to? Places are we going to be in? Who's going to be there? The GM really doesn't control that at all, and
Right.
a lot of these systems are built for the players to say, okay, here's what we need to do. We need to go here. We need to talk to this guy. We need to do this thing. And so having some kind of map plus factions plus NPC names lets you do that. You can idly sit, even if the thing is all about this rebellion on Tantos 5, because the map is sitting on the table, one of the players might just go, hang on, what about
Right.
this place over here? It says that they're like arms manufacturers. Maybe we should go over there and see if they, and
Well, that's very much a thing that I like about the sandboxy style of play, is that even the GM, where you're like, well, obviously this is the most important, interesting planet in the sector. I mean, it's over here in the corner, but they have all the cool gear and all the psychics live here, and it's going to be great. Everybody's going to want to go there. They're like, no, we're going to stay on this shithole planet the whole time. You're like, you know what? Whatever works for you. If you think you can control this planet, good for you. But yeah, I think that for me, like adding the only real thing that I feel like I'm going to need to wholesale add to it is the ability to generate the details of those sectors on the fly. Because I've loved about Stars Without Number the loose kind of nudging that it does.
so good.
Where
Those
you're like,
tables are so good.
yeah, where you're just like, and I love that Kevin has added supplements that build on them. Like, I wish that, I was talking about this on stream the other day, I wish that Emicron, that tool that auto-generates, I wish that it had all the merchant shit in it from that supplement, where it was like, okay, cool, here's all the details of the planet, here are your friends, here are some enemies, here are the conflicts on the planet, here's some locations, but it'd be really cool if it was also like, and here's the natural resources of this planet, or whatever. And I think that the things that you choose to include in the random table, not just the table entries, but the columns and rows of that table really speak to what the game is about, right? Like,
Yeah.
if I include in the table a plunderables, category, like what can you steal from this planet? Why, if the government of this planet went away, if nobody's watching you, how could you best exploit this place? That's going to say a lot about the kinds of actions that the characters are taking.
Yeah.
So for me, that'll be a place that, and again, it's a table, so it's not that hard. It's just a matter of filling them out as I go and really editing down the total results, where I'm going to be adding on to the existing thing. But there's some precedent set there in the rumors table in Blades, in the jobs system for generating jobs. And I think those things will also stay. We'll just expand on them for this game.
Yeah, and it also lets you inject once again the like specific vision of Womb of Night as opposed to space adventure. Like even though Stars Without Number is arguably like a lot more generic than Womb, it does have like the first time I started making systems, it was before the tool was available, so I had to roll everything, which was fine. But
in my day, we rolled everything on the table by hand. It's only like 1,200 rolls or something. It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. But the very first thing I rolled was Police State Tomb World.
Yes.
And I was like, "What the?" Because I didn't read the tables ahead of time, and I just kind of assumed like, "Oh, it's space adventure, whatever." And that result was so powerful. Like it, and that's
what I love about GMing systems and stuff like that are, I mean, it's like old school adventures, right? It's like, okay, well, now I have to deal with 8 pixies and a mountain lion. let's how does that, or like there's a merchant 2 levels into the dungeon, how does that work? It's the same, but on a setting level where you take a step back and you have to say, okay, so what do we do about this planet that's a police state tomb world? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and so the Womb of Night entries will be even more,
Yeah.
colorful and specific and interesting, and will take you in, pull you into that setting. And often, as we've discovered with Stars Without Number, um, the entry itself is so evocative. And Kevin does; he's a very generous man, and I thought it was just a bunch of tags at first, and I was like, "Great, Police State Tomb World! I can run a whole fucking series on that." And then you turn the page, and it's like, "This is what a police state does."
Right, here are 6 things that you could do. Yeah, and so that every
Oh
time they
my
go
God, it
back
has
to a planet.
NPCs, it has like what they want and what faction wars they're involved in.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
fantastic.
yeah, so like going that far is not an option, but I think we know that there's a lot of power in just that the evocative
Yeah.
tag, the evocative thing. Uh, that will it leaves you room to make it your own as the GM, and it also lets the game author like inject their own vision.
Yeah, and I guess this is to me what is so appealing about a project like Womb of Night, in that all I really, and I say this completely flippantly, but all I really need to do is just like watch a bunch of weird movies and read some comics and listen to Stoner Rock for several hours, make a bunch of notes, and then just make a game out of it. It'll be fine. Just throw that into the game. But really, it's like you said, there's that idea of the game relying so heavily on what you called the poetry layer, which is like my new favorite game design term ever. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Just because I love the idea of filling in the poetry layer, of just being
Yeah.
like, I just need to create an evocation of the weird jumble of, pot smoke and weird colors that this setting is made up of,
Yeah.
and be able to impart that to people so that when they're playing, they're getting the experience that I envision when I'm, brainstorming this stuff. And that's really, for me, all game design really is taking a thing in your head, an idea of what fictional space might be like, and passing it on to other people so they can replicate it reasonably reliably, but to be able to surprise themselves with it.
That's a great way to put it. And definitely a big, big design goal for me in this is to find people. You're not fully in this camp, but partially that you have a lot to say, a lot of interesting stuff to say about role playing, about cool settings and characters and situations, and like you're a tabletop game designer, so you're already
I mean, it depends on who you ask, but yeah.
you're most of the way there, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but like Allison, who's making
Yeah.
the Western hack, Sparrow's Folly, uh, she wouldn't say she's a tabletop game designer, but she's a brilliant writer and poet, and so she hopefully my goal with this is she can make a cool Blades in the Dark playset
And
without
that
learning how to make a tabletop role playing game.
and that's what I love about the ball that Vincent got rolling, and the thing that you're doing very intentionally with Blades, especially for me in the community of nerds I have around me, is that they're all either role-playing game inexperienced, design inexperienced, but intensely creative people and really into the idea of creating their own stuff, and they're super nerdy about things that they love. So they have that passion and energy, but game design appears to, from a distance, be this very daunting thing. And so it's really nice to have a framework, even if it's for, if you want to tell a story about the rise and fall of a, ballroom dancer, this is not the place for that. But, I think a lot of people can slot into the idea of the crack team trying to accomplish their job amidst pressure of other teams and heat and all that stuff. Like, I think the themes are very strong.
Yeah,
Certainly
the
appeal to
battling
me.
dance crew. Maybe you could do that.
Yeah,
If not,
right. Exactly.
yeah,
You could do a similar thing. You could be a breakdance crew, but
yeah,
it's. I think it's giving a space to would-be designers to become that, to make a thing that feels to them like expressing a thing that's in their head into a replicable experience for other people. And there's a
I hope
very
so. Yeah, that's definitely a big goal. I feel like we will probably live to see that happen in video games,
right.
where there'll be tools. Minecraft is already kind of getting into that space, but there'll be tools that let non-coders and non-software developers make a video game. Um, and that's super exciting because I want to do that. But
Right? Yeah. Well, I run into that as a tabletop focused designer a lot of the time, where I'm like, I got all kinds of great ideas about games and stuff, but how does computer? I can't
yeah,
make it do a thing. So, yeah. I mean, it's nice to work at that from both angles, right? To say, we're gonna try to build a framework for people to create stuff, and they'll be able to tell whether it's working because there's a lot of good feedback that comes from the system, where you can tell just by playing it whether it's doing the thing you want.
yeah, yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm super excited to make Womb happen. I know people have been asking about if I'm going to be showing off the stuff as I work on it. I definitely like. I want to get if not just feedback, like be able to share it, especially now that we have some context. Thanks to John coming in and checking it out. So keep an eye on that in the future.
I'm super excited. I'm a big fan of it already. Just like in on the mind meld layer of imagining what it might be like.
Yeah, I'm doing that thing that game designers do where they're like, I wish there was a game like this, and then being like, well, I guess I'll have to make one. So
Yeah, because to me, and Vincent said this a long time ago, but game design is like every other art form. Like there's the craft of it, the technical skills of various sorts. But at the end of the day, as a creative person making something, you have something to say,
yeah,
and that's what is exciting. Like when I know you, and I know what you're into and what you think is cool, and your like media education touchstones and all that stuff. So when you say I have something to say about this topic, psychedelic space action, like I'm like, fuck, I
yeah,
want to hear what you have to say about that
yeah.
through the lens of a game in this case. But
Yeah, and I think, I mean, that to me was kind of one of the core things about the Kickstarter was it was really cool to watch you curate that group of people. Because I think that a lot of folks were like, well, how many different iterations of like the same game can you get? But if you look at the massive breadth of like experience and background of the people making these things, we're all investing in a thing that is similar to what John is making, but in our own very specific way. So it's pretty cool. I'm pretty excited about it.
yeah, I can't wait to play it.
Yeah. So I'll have a draft for you by tomorrow. No,
Great.
that's a lie.
I want it on my desk by 9.
It's a total lie. Not going to happen. But I'm excited to get back to work on it, and I promise I'll keep everybody up to date as I go along. Thank you so much for coming tonight, John. This was really fun. I love
Yeah,
hanging
super
out
fun.
and talking games with you, and hopefully we can do it again.
Yeah, for sure.
So for those of you who want to learn more about John Harper's stuff, what's the best way to do that, John? Where should people go to seek you out?
Uh, Twitter, I'm at John_Harper, JOHN. And my website is 17design.com, all written out. It's kind of out of date though. I mean, it has my free games on it. If you want to go download some free games, they're there for you. For Blades, it's on DriveThru RPG right now. The early access PDF is available to everybody. If you missed the Kickstarter, you can go grab it there, and that will give you all future updates to the game, including the finished stuff when it's all done. In the tradition of Steam early access games.
Yeah, yeah. Only
So,
it'll actually get finished. So
well, right, exactly.
I kid. Darkest Dungeon came out today, so
Yes,
good job, Darkest Dungeon, for finishing your
Praise
game.
Cthulhu, and the eponymous Darkest Dungeon is super awesome and amazing, and oh my god, it's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you want to know about Blades, check it out on DriveThru, and also there's a G plus community for it, which you can find by searching communities. Super active. There's lots of discussions, and people will answer questions and talk about the game. So yeah, head over there if you want to do that.
Cool, cool. Well, thanks for coming, John. We will talk to you again soon. It has been a delight, and thanks for coming, everybody. It's always fun doing these kinds of like one-off, like niche topic, like indie tabletop design. Take that, Twitch. I don't know, whatever. If people can stream themselves forging horseshoes, we can talk about fictional positioning. So we'll see everybody next time. Thanks again for coming, John. Thanks everybody. See you around.
Bye.